The next portion of our agenda is kind of thinking about the future. What sort of actionable goals can we focus on? And I think we've heard a number from Soon Young as well as from the speakers on the call today. Certainly data, standardized data and how we can push that forward. We've also heard about strengthening coalitions, especially with labor unions, with librarians. Um, uh, uh, we've talked about the need for maybe newsletters or more social media presence. Um, and Soon Young has brought up several ideas in terms of working regionally would be an example. And other, using the UN Habitat localization model, connecting with mayors. So there are quite a few ideas there. And but we can't work on all of them, and some focus would be a great idea. So let me call on you again to raise your hand and to address some of these things. What can we focus on for the future? Julianne, would you go ahead, please?
Um, uh, Thank you. Uh, this discussion has been an excellent one so far, and I must say I'm having a bit of, to use the expression, deja vu all over again. And thinking about what we did in Beijing and what we did once we came back, for example, in San Francisco with our city ordinance, and to hear you talk about the issues that you're having in your different places, establishing the ordinances, but really emphasizing implementation of them and financing of them in order to implement them. That's one thing. I hear you and Mary Rose, you were talking about doing webinars and information sessions in various cities and rural areas. Definitely doing that now that we use social media and we do Zoom meetings more than we did back in 1995, 96, and able to still use that along the models that we did throughout California, for example, and I'm sure you're doing in your other states. So just to remember that, obviously data collection and disaggregate data collection um, to, to um, to see what we can do in our various newsletters and our reports. I know Wynn has done a report that we've shared with organizations in our networks, and that would be very important. What you're saying about DEI issues, all we need to still keep the context of our work in terms of the mission and vision and what we want to do about women and girls and their human rights. I'm at in academia now, and I know that a number of schools, including some law schools, have cut back or they cut their programs out dealing with DEI issues, and we definitely can't do that. This is our new challenge, but still to keep that same goal. I was thinking about the whole issue we've been talking about silos. And I just want to remind us on this call that even though the US has not ratified CEDAW, I remember the delegation, I think it was back in 2014, that there was a delegation from the US to Geneva to participate in the meetings of the CEDAW committee. And that had never been done. And this was our way of being creative, in spite of the fact that the US had not ratified CEDAW, that we were able to sit at the table with the CEDAW committee and tell them about what we were doing here in the US. And obviously, they took that very seriously. When I hear now about the discussions that Sun Yun mentioned at the CSW, with the officials from Nigeria. And I was thinking, I wrote a note to myself to bring up what I know that the WIN board had done under Alafi's leadership, to send a letter. We discussed the letter to send to Nigeria, expressing our solidarity with them. And I'm just thinking in terms of networking, not only locally, nationally, globally, doing this with CSW, doing it with the CEDAR committee, doing this with Nigeria. And of course, that's one thing that Sun Yun mentioned in her work. So on different levels, doing that type of networking, information sharing, and those are just a few ideas I think that blend in to what a number of us in our organizations are doing. And as you say, Susan, obviously each organization will have to pick what they can do given what resources they have. And Sunyan did mention government, U.S. government entities. We know when we look at the newspaper or listening to the news, we don't know what status they are in, if they still exist, if they still have staff members. She did say that she hopes in 3 years there will be some change, but for us to think about in the meantime, what we can still do with our contacts in those various entities. So that I just wanted to make some of those points and piggyback on the points that had been made earlier, and definitely what Sun Yun said in her video. Thank you.
Thank you, Julianne. You've brought in a lot of ideas, and also the very important point that I'm sure each of us need to go back to our own organizations to kind of say what would they like to work on. Mary Rose.
Yeah, really quick, I have to leave to go to work. I want to commit to and asking your help to put together a small webinar with some key stakeholders that I already made contact with, as I mentioned in the chat, the examples. And I need 2 or 3 of you to be part of that with me, and I'm looking at September. So I have to go, and I'm going to put my email in the chat. And thank you for all wisdom and all the work you've done. You are just incredible group of women that I'm happy to be aligned with, and I gotta go, so I'll put my email in the chat and maybe plan for September something, okay?
Thank you very much, Mary Rose. It's been lovely to have you here.
Susan, before we move on, could we introduce Jan Stroud, who joined us?
Sure.
Jan, are you available to speak?
I am. Thank you. I was just writing in the chat, but if I could take a minute or two, apologize for an earlier meeting that I needed to stay on and join you all wonderful women. Some of you know in Bozeman, Montana, where we can talk about just a couple of other ideas around some of these collaborations. We came away inspired from the UNCSW and you all to really move our resolution to an ordinance. We have met with some early success on that. We're working now with our city manager who wants to see a few ordinances and to give them the language for a City for Bozeman ordinance from our task force here locally. So we're pretty fired up about that. And some of you know that, looking also for any kind of intersectional analysis tools that we can also offer up. And we don't need to take up a lot of time, but if any of you can help us with that, we would appreciate that. But I wanted to also offer from the perspective of what we say, a blue city and a bright red state. A couple of thoughts. One is, and this may be duplicative, and I apologize for that as well, but as I was thinking about it, one of the thoughts I had coming from the NGO-CSW is the success of the feminist foreign policy track at the conference. I went to most of those, and one of my sheroes and a friend is Charlotte Bunch, who of course is a incredible foundational person for us with her women's rights or human rights. She is now a very active part of that leadership of the feminist foreign policy. I think it would be important to invite her to a future meeting, or a few of you or us make contact with her. I think there's some very interesting ways we can be looking at overlap for the goals, which I know include in the feminist foreign policy campaign, because the National Organization for Women, when I was co-leading the Global Feminist National Committee, we passed that resolution in our National Now organization, which is the way people make campaigns in Now. You have to pass these resolutions. We have a strong resolution for feminist foreign policy. And frankly, the exciting news of now for some of us is the fact there is an election this summer, if any of you happen to be Now members, for the new president. There's a every 4 years we elect a president, vice president team. There's a team that that a number of us are supporting that we think will bring Now back in a lot of ways that has been missing in action, and that have a particular understanding of global feminism. We also passed a Cities for CEDAW campaign resolution in 2019 that educated and organized Now members. So I was pleased to see that on the list. But for a number of us, we haven't been able to participate, I'll put it diplomatically, in the ways that we think would be as useful for that organization. Last thing I'll mention is, way back when we were starting our campaign in Montana, we had been a part of allyships, particularly with Indigenous people and the tribal nations. We have a very strong organization called Western Native Voice. And we also worked with the Seventh Generation Fund, which some of you in California may be familiar with. They wrote a statement on the relationship between UN DRIP, the Declaration of Indigenous Peoples' Rights, and CEDAW. I can maybe dig that out, or somebody else may have it, but it's another way of thinking collaboratively with not only what I would call BIPOC and women's and two-spirited leaders in that part of our larger communities, which is really important in Montana. We collaborate a lot on Indigenous Peoples Days. So I think there's some other areas we also can think about, which are also rural areas for those that are not in urban Indigenous situations. But certainly most of our tribal nations are in rural areas that people before didn't want to be inhabiting. And that is, I think, an opportunity that we might want to pursue, and certainly would be glad to help with that. So I've said a lot. I'm just looking over my notes. Oh yeah, the ERA Coalition. I think even because they have over 300 coalition members, a number of them overlap with what has been suggested here. Montana Now has been a part of that coalition and used to work very closely, excuse me, with Carol Jenkins when she was the CEO of that organization. And certainly there's been some collaboration with us, but I think that would be another strong place for us to come together, as we have done. But I think at this moment in time, when we're all fighting, if I can call it, the war on women, there's just so many opportunities that we can do that. And I was also going to just mention the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, which I know Elia and I are also both a part of, just had a big birthday party, 110 years of that. And they've just gutted the Women's Peace and Security budget for that important work that they initiated, and a lot of us have worked with. So those are some obvious places to go, but I just wanted to add a little bit from my vantage point and what Montana can contribute in particular. And I'll keep you posted on the Now information. I will send a copy, if you don't mind, of the team's platform that's running for president and vice president. There's another team that will follow the current leadership, and so you can check them all out on the National Now website, to be fair and diplomatic about it. But this other team is always been supportive of our work with Global Feminist and CEDAW and ways to make a difference Well, of course, sorry, but of course, the U.S. Women's Caucus of the UN, which just had, congratulations to all of you leaders on
Thank
that. You might have mentioned it as well, but that's, of course, an incredible group. Thank you for asking for my feedback. And again, sorry to run late on my other meeting.
Thank you, Jan. So you've introduced again more coalition building with some of these other feminist groups working on, very, important leaders and also feminist efforts, whether it's now or feminist foreign policy, the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, ERA Coalition, et cetera.